Hello everybody, this is Mark Kozik, also known as Zarkus of Zarkus Model Kits. Today I'm going to show you one of my print failures. Life is too short to make all your own mistakes, and it's better to learn from the mistakes of others. So in a series of videos I hope to show you all the things I'm doing wrong in the hopes that it'll help you improve with what you're doing in model making. So here is a Trade Federation bomber print coming out of my Anycubic Photon printer. The way that it works is there is a resin vat here which has an FEP layer, which is a clear Teflon sheet that's underneath, and the base comes down and there's an LCD screen underneath that flashes a UV image up and creates the first layer there. And then it pulls away and rips the layer away from the Teflon sheet. It comes back down and then it flashes the next image, which cures and hardens, and so on and so on. You can get a lot more detail with these resin printers than you can with fused filament, and I'd rather take the issues I have with these versus the fused filament. You can see on the upper left here that this wing did not fully form. I'm going to take this puppy out of there and set it down. I'm using a product called Elegoo. This is the first print with it, and the quality seems to be alright, and it seems to smell less than the Anycubic resin, which I usually use, which is very good as well. But Elegoo is about 15 bucks cheaper per 500 milliliters, so I think I'm going to continue working with that. You can see on the right there that the first few layers are starting to peel away from the base plate as well. There is a shearing action that occurs on the print as it's ripping away from the FEP layer and going back down. And so you've got to figure out ways to compensate for that by the way you design the print. You can change where your supports are to make it stick better. You can change the hardness of your initial layers. This is maybe 5 layers at 60 seconds of UV bombardment. I might want to change this to 8 or 10 layers and use 80 seconds of bombardment to make it harder and make it flatter so it doesn't want to curl. By the way, if the audio doesn't match the video, it's because I had to redo it. I had too many but-does and hesitations. I'm using my iPhone 7 Plus and mixing everything with Mixcraft 8 for the audio. So I set it down on some paper towels, which are on a cheap bath towel. I've got a plastic scraper, and I'm going to change my camera angle so you can see this a little bit better. I'll do a video later where I show you all the stuff that I use. Now if you take your scraper, just do a quick jab at the base. It pops right off like that. You can see all the little supports which are going to have to come off. But I'm going to do an alcohol wash first. Your prints are going to have a slimy resin residue on the surface that you want to get off. If you were to harden your print now, it would cover up a lot of detail. And so I've got a couple Tupperware tubs of 100% pure alcohol. I'm soaking this in. You can see sediment on the bottom is starting to swirl around. I might need to change this out pretty soon. Anything less than 95% pure alcohol is garbage and a waste of time. So I'm just rubbing this to see how slick it is and help it get some of that off. The bulk of it is taken off in this first tub here. If you're printing anything large, you're going to want to make your print hollow because the resin is expensive and it's unnecessary to have a big solid block of resin. You can see how the front has these open window inlets to allow the alcohol in. And on the back, I don't know if you can see it, there are engine exhausts which allow the alcohol to flow through. So I will now take this and put it in the final wash. You can see here that the final wash is much cleaner because most of the resin has been removed. Some people like to soak their prints for hours on end. I might do it for 10-15 minutes at the most, depending on the size of it. This tub will eventually become the initial wash tub after it gets dirty. I'm going to take this out and let it air dry. And then we will remove the supports. You might need to wash this again after examining it, because sometimes the residue of the alcohol and resin will deposit in any recesses and cover up your detail again. So always look at it real well before you put it in a UV chamber. So I've let this air dry for a few minutes. You can still see some shiny residue spots on the surface, but this is a failed print, so for the purpose of this video I'm going to go ahead and work on it. There are a couple ways that you can take these supports off. My preferred way, of course, is to use a nice pair of sprue cutters that you would normally use on a styrene kit. It clips things off pretty cleanly, and I really like it. The other way is to go ahead and use your fingers and just yank on them and rip them off. It's really up to you depending on your print. It might be in a position where you can do that and it's not going to really hurt anything, but on a real fine edge it might break away some of the resin in the corners, so you might not want to do that. I prefer to use the sprue cutters for everything. Some people like to snip them off before it goes in the alcohol bath. Some like to do it afterwards. I prefer to do it after it's been in the UV chamber a little bit and it fully hardens the resin. I think if you do it that way, there's less of a chance of the sprue cutters marring the surface as you're going along, or if you do it by your fingers, you can still mar the surface as you pull these away and they scratch against the surface. If you're printing out a small print, you can actually cure it with a little UV flashlight that I got off of Amazon here. As you're going along, you can harden it in just several seconds if it's a small print. One thing you don't want to do is aim that UV flashlight at your chamber. It's got some UV protection on the glass or plastic, whatever that is, to not allow light to get in and make your resin bed a solid chunk. I happen to have my basement windows blocked off, so that helps prevent any exposure of the resin in the vat. And that can stay there for probably a week if need be. If I return it to the container, I usually filter it first before I bring it back in, so there's no contamination. Now I'm going to show you another issue that has arisen as my photon continues to print other things. I made this print larger recently to show more detail, and at the smaller size the supports I had were sufficient and it printed out quite cleanly. But if you look at the back center of the engine nozzles here, you see that they are marred, sort of flattened, and not crisp. So what I'm going to have to do is go back to my slicer program and add a few additional supports there so that prints out clearly. On the top center of the fuselage, you can see a couple dots there. Those are a couple witness marks or remnants or artifacts of where the original support was that have been snipped off. So one debate that I have is whether I should sand these off for a customer or leave them there for a customer to sand out themselves. I think in many cases I'm going to sand them myself, especially if it's in a very detailed area such as the rear exhaust here, so customers don't have to deal with that. You can see the detail on the sides of these bomblet generators. It looks much cooler when it's at a larger size than when it was shrunk down. So that was another reason why I increased it. You can see on the cannons, if the camera will focus, the DLP printer is able to get actual recesses in the cannon barrel fronts. And here is a hole underneath for a stand. Now I'm going to actually crack this open so you can see the hollow interior. Here you can see the hollowed out interior. The shell is several millimeters thick. Generally around 3 millimeters seems to be sufficient to make it hard and durable where it will not collapse on itself with handling. One issue with 3D generated model kits is that if you shrink or grow them, you also shrink or grow your shell size as well as your panel lines. I generally have my panel lines between 0.3 and 0.5 millimeters. You can grow your model so large that they look like canyons and look stupid, or you can shrink them so far down that they get lost in a coat of paint. So that's something I'm constantly dealing with. I don't like to hollow out my models with mesh mixer. I don't have a lot of experience with it, but so far I don't like it. Mainly because I cannot re-edit that model once I transport it back into my 3D design program. But we'll get into the computer aspect of things in another video. So today I'm going to leave it right here. Thanks for watching.